All right, here. So I just want to do. Somebody asked me to do my thoughts on net neutrality, so I figured I might as well make a video on this topic here. Now, all the liberals are freaking out like this is like the end of the world here. That these net neutrality, they call it net neutrality. You know, when Obama's FCC passed it in 2015, you know, they hailed it as, oh, net neutrality, that the internet is finally free. So we didn't even have these rules before 2015, but somehow the internet was working just perfectly. There was no problems with it, really. I mean, so I mean, why is there a need to pass this so-called net neutrality if we already had it? I mean, there wasn't people being denied internet access or being treated unfairly by, you know, these internet companies or whatever the fuck. So I mean, what was the need to pass it? So now that we are repealing it, or that we did repeal it, why is it the end of the world now? I mean, why, you know, I mean, like I see posts that people are making like, oh, it's going to cost money to watch, you know, to access websites now, just putting out fake news, bullshit. So, I mean, what's going to be different now? It's going to be just like it was back in, you know, before these were passed 2 years ago. So I don't get the need. I don't get why the government needs to regulate the internet. I mean, I don't want the FCC regulating the internet. The government, the federal government, has no role in regulating the internet. If you read the Constitution, you would find out that every right listed in the Constitution is, you know, that belongs to the federal government, but the rights that are not listed in the Constitution go to the states. So I don't see a fucking right. I don't see a fucking thing in the Constitution that says the federal government has the right to regulate the internet. It's not in there. So that means if there is a body that is going to regulate the internet at a governmental level, it belongs to the state or local government, not the federal government. Liberals don't understand that. I mean, why the fuck do we have a Department of Energy or a Department of Education? Those rights are not listed in the Constitution, so why do we have them? It doesn't make any fucking sense. It's unconstitutional. So I don't get why we even need net neutrality by the federal government. They call it net neutrality in the first place. And another thing about this so-called net neutrality, it doesn't prevent companies like Google or Facebook or Twitter or these big social media conglomerates from discriminating against conservative Trump or Trump supporters. You know, Twitter advertises that they're a free, you know, Twitter, you know, free social media. You can post whatever you want. We don't discriminate. You know, now if they said, oh, we're biased against conservatives, that would be another thing. But they advertise as this free, open social media platform to post your opinions. But they really, I actually demonstrated this in one of my videos about a year and a half ago, where I actually reported people making death threats against Trump. And Twitter did not suspend or take down the tweets of any of the users I reported. So they have a big bias there, and they've banned people like Roger Stone and Milo Yiannopoulos for nothing, pretty much. So like I said, liberals are just freaking out about net neutrality. Like, okay, you know, that net neutrality, the regulations are now gone. So where is, you know, what's going to happen? Nothing's going to happen. It's going to be just like it was. Nothing is going to change. We don't need the federal government regulating the internet. We don't need that. Everything the government regulates turns to shit. How are our public school systems? Oh, they're just fantastic. You know, I live by Detroit. I don't live in Detroit, thank God, but I live by Detroit, which has some of the worst public school systems I've ever seen in my life. I mean, just terrible. Thanks, federal government, for regulating the schools. How they do on the border? Yeah, 11 million illegals, probably more than that. Yeah, thanks, federal government. Great job. You know, everything they fucking touch goes to shit. So the last thing we need is the federal government getting involved in the internet and fucking around with that bullshit. Like I said, before these regulations were passed, the internet was perfect. It was fine. There was no problems with it. Everybody has access to it. We don't need the federal government getting involved. So there's my thoughts on that, people. But like I said, it just really freaks me. It just really angers me how there's so many. I see so many people just posting on on Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat, oh, net neutrality is dead. It's dead. No, actually, they just called it net neutrality. It's like they called the Patriot Act the Patriot Act, but was it really patriotic? No, it took away our Fourth Amendment rights. I mean, just because they say it's a freedom, it's freedom. You know, it doesn't. You know, they call you know, don't they call North Korea like the Democratic Republic of North Korea or some bullshit? Doesn't mean it's democratic. Same thing with, like, you know, they've called countries like, oh, we're the Democratic Republic of the Congo, but they're not Democrat. That doesn't mean they're Democrat. Just because you call something doesn't mean it really is that thing. So people just need to get informed. It's like 90% of the people advocating for this net neutrality and saying that, oh, Trump is doing this terrible thing, and the FCC commissioner, I think his name is like Ajit Pai or some shit. He's like an Indian guy or whatever. But saying that, oh, this is such a horrible move. The only thing they know is the name of the regulation he repealed. They don't know anything that's in it. They don't know that it doesn't prevent people like, or companies like Google, Facebook, and Twitter from discriminating. They don't know anything about it. They don't know that it was just passed 2 years ago, and before it was passed, the federal government or the internet was totally free. There was no problems with it. There was no need to pass these regulations. And it also has in there, I believe it's called forbearment or some shit in Title 2 of this net neutrality, which allows the FCC to only prosecute companies it sees fit. So, you know, one company could break the law, you know, break these regulations, and another company could break them, but the FCC can only choose to prosecute one of them. I believe that's in there. And they've also, Ajit Pai was also talking about, whatever his name is, how many companies have been hindered by these regulations because they're afraid of breaking them. Oh, yeah, we've never heard that. Never heard of that before. Thanks, federal government. All these motherfucking regulations. Regulations, regulate. Bullshit. These regulations hold companies down. They prevent them from expanding because everybody's afraid of breaking some little petty fucking regulation. I mean, there's so many regulations. I mean, it's like 10 times bigger than the Bible, probably. So there you go. Thanks, federal government, for hindering business with all these fucking regulations. Thank God Trump is coming in and saying, hey, we're going to get rid of these regulations, because they're all bullshit. You know, like, I work for a small business, and they come in, and of course, you know, the federal government or whoever comes in, and they inspect the business, and like, you can't stack shit 2 feet from the ceiling, and you got to have all these regulations, and they're definitely going to find something wrong. They always do, because it's the corruption of the federal government. It's the dumbassery of the federal government saying, oh, you can't stack things 2 feet from the ceiling, or that's a fire hazard. You got to have a fire hydrant here and here and here and here. So yeah, it's just a bunch of bullshit. So the less regulations, the better. The last thing we need is the federal government getting involved in our internet, because like I said, everything the federal government touches turns to shit. So there you go, people.